We are counting down 20 vintage British poor man's one-pot dinners built for seniors living alone. These are the meals that needed no recipe card, no second pair of hands, and no more than a single pot on the hob. Dishes that stretched a handful of ingredients into something warm, filling, and quietly dignified. From the terraced kitchens of the post-war North to stone cottages in the Welsh valleys, these suppers kept older people fed, warm, and independent when money was short and the family had moved on. Each entry is simple enough to make on a pension, substantial enough to carry you through a cold afternoon, and rooted in the kind of thrift that modern kitchens have almost entirely forgotten. Which forgotten one-pot dinner tops our list? Let us count down from number 20. Number 20. Lentil and bacon broth. Before meal deals and microwavable soup pouches arrived to fill every service station and supermarket aisle, the lentil and bacon broth was the one-pot supper that kept older British people going through the lean months. A single rasher of streaky bacon snipped into the pot. A cupful of dried red lentils, costing just a few pence in the 1950s and not much more today. A diced onion, a carrot scraped thin, and enough water to cover the lot by 2 inches. That was the whole recipe. No stock cube required. The bacon provided the salt, the lentils provided the body, and the long simmer provided everything else. By the time the lentils had dissolved into a thick, amber-colored broth, the whole kitchen had changed. Steam on the window, the smell of something slow and honest. A bowl of this cost less than 3d to make in 1953, and kept a single person fed for 2 days if the pot was covered and left in a cool larder overnight. Older women living alone after the war, widows on fixed incomes, learned that a pot of lentil broth made on Monday could become something different by Wednesday. A thicker version on toast, a stew with the last potato dropped in. Nothing wasted, nothing repeated exactly, and never once boring. Number 19. Potato and leek soup. Wales gave Britain this soup, and every Welsh grandmother worth her salt had a version that was entirely her own. The ingredients cost almost nothing. Leeks often grown in the back garden through winter when nothing else would survive the frost. Potatoes peeled thick to make the work quicker. A knob of lard or butter scraped from the dish. Water from the tap. That was all. The leeks went in first, soft and sweet after 10 minutes of gentle frying in the fat. Then the potatoes, cut into rough chunks. Then the water. Then the lid, and an hour of patience. What came out was a pale, silky soup that clung to the back of a spoon and filled the stomach like a proper meal. National Food Survey records from 1957 show that leeks appeared in over 60% of Welsh households at least once a week during winter, a testament to how deeply embedded this simple vegetable had become in the national diet. For seniors living alone, this soup was the ideal. 1 pot, 1 hour, enough for 2 meals with bread to dip. Number 18. Oxtail soup. This was the soup that took the longest and rewarded the most. Oxtail, bought from the butcher in the 1950s for just £1 a pound, was the cut that supermarkets later decided was too unfamiliar, too bony, too much effort for a generation raised on convenience. But for older cooks who had been making this since before the war, the effort was the point. The oxtail pieces went into the pot with onion, carrot, a bay leaf, and cold water. The burner went on low. Then you left it entirely alone for 3 hours. What happened in that pot during those 3 hours was something no modern shortcut could replicate. The collagen in those bony segments dissolved slowly into the liquid, turning it from thin brown water into a glossy, deeply flavored broth that coated the lips and warmed the chest from the inside. When the meat fell from the bone, you fished out the pieces, shredded the soft flesh, discarded the bone, and returned the meat to the pot. Thickened with 1 tablespoon of plain flour, stirred smooth into cold water, the soup turned rich and dark. Diaries from elderly women in Lancashire recall making oxtail soup every Sunday in autumn, the pot sitting on the range all afternoon while they read or listened to the wireless. 1 pot of it lasted the best part of a week. Number 17. Pea and ham soup. The ham bone was never thrown away. That was the first rule of any kitchen shaped by rationing. After the Sunday joint was carved and the last cold slices eaten on Monday, the bone went into a bag in the cool larder, waiting for Tuesday. On Tuesday morning, the bone went into the pot with a cupful of dried split peas, a diced onion, and cold water. The peas had been soaked overnight, softened and ready to collapse into something thick and satisfying after 2 hours at a low simmer. By lunchtime, the broth had turned the color of old gold. The ham bone had given up every trace of its smoky, salty flavor, and the peas had dissolved into a dense, porridge-thick soup that needed nothing more than a slice of bread to become a full meal. In Durham pit villages through the 1950s, oral histories record that pea and ham soup was the midweek staple for older women living alone, made on Tuesday from Sunday's bone and eaten in some form through to Friday. Frugal, filling, sustaining in a way that no tinned equivalent ever quite managed. Pearl barley cost almost nothing and stretched almost any pot of water into a meal. That was the principle behind vegetable broth with barley, the supper that required only what was left in the vegetable rack at the end of the week. A parsnip gone slightly soft, the last 2 carrots, half a turnip forgotten at the back of the shelf, a stalk of celery, an onion. All of it went into the pot with a generous handful of pearl barley and enough cold water to cover everything by 3 inches. No stock, no seasoning beyond a pinch of salt and a shake of white pepper, and no lid removed for a full hour and a half. The barley swelled as it cooked, turning the broth cloudy and thick, absorbing the flavor of every vegetable in the pot until it tasted like something richer and more deliberate than a handful of odds and ends had any right to produce. By 1952, the Women's Institute recipe pamphlets were recommending pearl barley as an essential store cupboard staple for older women on limited incomes, a single bag costing less than 4p and capable of thickening a week's worth of broths. It never went off. It never needed refrigerating. And it turned the end of the week's leftovers into Tuesday's proper dinner. The tin of corned beef was the one-pot emergency that sat at the back of every British kitchen cupboard through the 1950s and 1960s, ready for the days when the purse was empty, and the week still had 3 days left in it. Peel 3 potatoes, dice them small, dice an onion. Fry both together in a little lard until the potato was golden at the edges, and the onion was soft and sweet, about 15 minutes over a medium heat. Then open the tin, break the corned beef into rough chunks, and add it to the pan. Press everything down with the back of a spoon and leave it untouched for 5 minutes until the bottom crisped. Flip it in sections, press it down again, and leave another 5 minutes. What came out of the pan was hash, crisp at the edges, soft in the middle, salty and savory and deeply satisfying. Oral histories from retired factory workers in the West Midlands recall corned beef hash as the Friday night supper of choice for older people living alone, a meal that cost under a shilling and required nothing more than a frying pan and a quarter hour of attention. Served with a pickled onion from the jar on the shelf and bread to mop the pan, it was enough. Before olive oil arrived on British shelves, before every supermarket sold 6 varieties of butter, there was dripping. The rendered fat saved from the Sunday roast, cooled in a jar, kept at room temperature in the winter kitchen without spoiling for days. In the leanest households of the 1950s and 1960s, potato soup made with dripping was not a poverty measure. It was simply cooking. A large onion was softened in a tablespoon of dripping in the pot. 4 or 5 potatoes, peeled and diced, were added to the onion with enough water to cover. The pot was simmered without a lid until the potato was completely soft. The potatoes were then mashed roughly in the pot with a wooden spoon, leaving the soup thick and uneven in texture, with soft chunks floating in a rich, slightly fatty broth. The dripping gave it a depth of flavor that water and butter alone could never achieve. That faint, meaty undertone. That quality that made the soup taste like something more than its parts. For seniors living alone in the years before central heating made every room warm, a bowl of potato soup made with dripping was warmth that started before you even sat down. Number 13. Cod and potato stew. Fish was the affordable protein of the British coast, and well into the 1960s, a piece of cod fillet cost less than 6pence at the fishmonger's counter. For older people living alone in coastal towns from Whitby to Lowestoft, cod and potato stew was the mid-week supper that asked for nothing complicated. A cup of water in the pot, a diced onion, 2 or 3 potatoes cubed. Simmer for 15 minutes until the potato is just tender. Then lay the cod fillet directly into the hot broth, put the lid on, and turn the heat to its lowest setting. In 10 minutes, the fish would have poached perfectly in the steam, flaking apart into soft, white pieces that fell through the potato-thickened broth. A tablespoon of parsley, chopped fine, stirred in at the end. Nothing more required. No cream, no stock, no additional seasoning beyond a pinch of salt added at the start. The cod brought its own gentle salinity. The potato thickened the broth naturally, and the parsley freshened everything just enough to make the bowl feel complete. Diaries from retired fishermen's wives in Yorkshire recall making this stew every Wednesday without fail. The pot on the hob by 4:30, the bowl on the table by 5. Number 12. Kidney and onion stew. Lamb kidneys were the cut that stretched a tight budget into a proper meal. In the early 1950s, a pair of lamb kidneys cost just a few pence at any butcher's counter, and for older people managing alone on a pension, they represented something valuable, real meat and real protein, at a price that left money for bread and coal. The preparation required only confidence. Slice the kidneys in half. Remove the white core with a sharp knife. Fry them briefly in a little lard until browned on the outside. Remove them from the pot. Fry a sliced onion in the same fat until soft and golden. Return the kidneys to the pot. Add a splash of water, a spoonful of plain flour stirred smooth with a little cold water, and a shake of Worcestershire sauce. Cover and simmer for 20 minutes until the sauce thickened and the kidneys turned tender. Served over mashed potato made in the same pot after the stew was done, this was a supper that cost less than 3pence and delivered something rich and savory that tasted far more expensive than it had any right to. Oral histories from retired factory workers in Sheffield recall kidney stew as Wednesday night supper, as reliable and expected as the bins going out. 1 sausage. That was sometimes all there was. And 1 sausage, when it understood its place in a pot of split peas, became enough. This was the principle behind split pea and sausage pot, the supper that appeared in Women's Institute notebooks from the 1940s onward as a recommended meal for older women on limited incomes. A cup of yellow split peas, soaked overnight and drained. A single pork sausage, pricked and browned quickly in the dry pot before the peas went in. An onion, diced. A carrot. Cold water to cover. Lid on, low heat, 90 minutes. The sausage broke down slowly as the pot simmered, its fat leaching into the liquid and flavoring every pea in the pot. By the time the peas had dissolved into a thick, golden mush, the sausage had given up most of its structure and become part of the dish itself, its flavors indistinguishable from the whole. The result was something dense and warming and deeply savory. A meal substantial enough to last 2 days with the pot covered and stored in the larder. A week's supply of dried split peas cost 4p in 1955. One sausage cost 3p. Total, 7p for 2 days of proper eating. The smell of bacon fat meeting cold water in a pot is one of the most specifically British kitchen smells there is. It is the smell of necessity turning itself into something edible and good. 2 rashers of streaky bacon, the cheapest cut, are diced into the pot, and a little of their own fat is released over medium heat. Then the cabbage, half a small head, is shredded roughly and added to the pot while the bacon is still in it. Then an onion. Then 2 potatoes, diced small. Then water to cover. Then the lid. The bacon flavors the liquid as it simmers, turning the cabbage and potato into something savory and filling, something that tastes deliberately made rather than assembled from scraps. Bacon and cabbage broth appeared in post-war household management guides aimed specifically at elderly people living alone. The Ministry of Food recommended it as an economical and nutritionally adequate meal that required minimal preparation and no specialist equipment beyond a single medium pot. It was also one of the few dishes on this list that improved with reheating, the flavors concentrating overnight until the second bowl tasted better than the first. Number 9. Carrot and lentil soup with a bone. Any bone. A lamb chop bone from last night's supper, a chicken carcass stripped of its meat, even a bare ham knuckle with nothing visible on it. The bone went into the pot first, because the bone was never the meal itself, but the thing that made the meal possible. 4 large carrots, scrubbed but not peeled. A cupful of red lentils. An onion. Cold water. Lid on, low heat, an hour and a half. Then the bone was lifted out and discarded. The lentils had dissolved completely, thickening the soup until it was dense enough to hold a spoon upright. The carrots had softened into the broth, their sweetness balancing the earthiness of the lentils. The bone had given up a subtle richness that no stock cube could entirely replicate. For older people living alone in the 1950s and the 1960s, this soup represented the full expression of post-war thrift. Nothing bought specifically for the soup, nothing that could not be stored for weeks without refrigeration. The carrots came from the garden or the greengrocer. The lentils lived in a jar on the shelf for months. The bone came from yesterday. The water came from the tap. The warmth came from the pot. Number 8. Porridge supper. This one requires a moment of explanation for anyone who has only ever eaten porridge at breakfast. In Scotland and the industrial north of England, well into the 1960s, porridge was not exclusively a morning dish. It was eaten at supper too, made thick, salted rather than sweetened, and served in deep bowls with a puddle of cold milk poured into the center, which cooled each spoonful before it reached the mouth. For older people living alone on small incomes, porridge for supper was not defeat. It was entirely practical. Rolled oats cost less than any other filling food available, kept in a bag on the shelf without spoiling, and took 4 minutes to cook in a single pot with water and a pinch of salt. A large bowl of thick, salted porridge provided enough calories to carry a person through to morning without the need for anything else. Oral histories from retired miners in County Durham recall eating porridge for both breakfast and supper several nights a week through the harder winters of the 1950s. Not because there was nothing else, but because it was the sensible thing to do. No washing up, no waste, no expense. Just a pot, oats, water, and 10 minutes. Number 7. Scrag end of mutton. Stew, scrag end, was the neck of the lamb or mutton, the cut that butchers sold cheapest because it required the longest cooking, and contained more bone than meat by weight. But the bones were the point. Long, slow simmering of scrag end in water with onion, carrot, and potato produced a broth with a richness that no expensive cut could match. The collagen and marrow working their way into the liquid over 2 to 3 hours until the pot held something halfway between a soup and a stew. By the early 1950s, scrag end cost just $1 a pound at any market stall, a price that made it the regular purchase of pensioners and widows managing alone on fixed incomes. The meat, when it finally yielded after 3 hours of simmering, fell from the bone in soft, tender threads that dissolved in the mouth. The broth thickened naturally. The carrots and potatoes absorbed the meaty liquid. And the whole pot, made from 4p worth of ingredients and 3 hours of unattended simmering on the lowest possible heat, produced something that tasted like Sunday dinner. For seniors living alone, this was not a compromise. It was the real thing, made slowly and properly, the way it had always been made. Number 6. Tomato and rice soup. Every British kitchen of the 1950s kept a tin of Heinz tomato soup in the cupboard. But the women who knew how to cook stretched that tin into something double its size, turned it from a single serving into a proper meal for 2 days, and made it taste like it had been made from scratch. 1 tin of condensed tomato soup goes into the pot, half a tin of water, half a cupful of long grain rice, a pinch of sugar to balance the acidity, a shake of white pepper. Lid on, 20 minutes, checking and stirring every 5 minutes to ensure the rice does not stick. What came out was a thick, rice-laden tomato soup that was substantial enough to call itself dinner rather than a starter. The rice absorbed the tomato liquid as it cooked, swelling and softening until the soup was almost a porridge in texture, deeply filling and requiring nothing alongside it except bread. This technique appeared in wartime cookery booklets and was still being passed between neighbors in the 1960s and 1970s. The kind of practical kitchen knowledge transmitted by word of mouth rather than a published recipe. Cheap, warm, ready in 20 minutes from a single pot. Number 5. Boiled beef and vegetables. A piece of silverside or brisket went into the pot with cold water, a halved onion, a carrot, a stick of celery, and a bay leaf. It was brought slowly to a boil, skimmed, and then turned to the lowest possible heat for 2 hours before potato quarters, another carrot, and a wedge of cabbage were added. It cooked for another hour. Then the meat was lifted out, carved into thick slices, and served in a deep bowl with the vegetables, with a ladleful of the golden broth poured over everything. For seniors living alone, this one pot produced 3 days of eating. It was eaten cold with pickles the next day. It was shredded into the remaining stock the day after. It was started in the morning and finished without ever needing to stand over it. Number 4. Tripe and onions. Tripe simmered in milk and onions. For older working-class people across the north of England, well into the 1970s, tripe was not a challenge. It was simply supper. Honeycomb tripe went into the pot with sliced onions, covered with milk, and simmered gently for an hour until tender, and the onion-flavored milk had thickened into a pale, delicate sauce. Salt, white pepper, a knob of butter at the end. 1 pot, milk, onions, thyme. In 1952, over 300 tripe shops operated in Greater Manchester alone, selling primarily to older customers who saw no reason to stop eating it simply because fashions had changed. Number 3. Scotch broth. A lamb neck cutlet simmered in cold water for an hour. Then diced swede, carrot, onion, shredded cabbage, pearl barley, a sprig of parsley. Another hour on the lowest heat, the barley swelling to thicken the broth until it tasted of nothing easily identified and everything that was good. A pot made on Sunday was Monday's lunch, Tuesday's dinner, and Wednesday's thick soup with the last bread heels stirred through it. Nothing wasted, nothing repeated exactly, never insufficient. Number 2. Cock-a-leekie. An old boiling fowl, a bunch of leeks, cold water, and a small handful of prunes. The prunes were the ingredient that separated cock-a-leekie from any other chicken soup on earth, their deep sweetness working against the savory richness of the bird, until the pot held something balanced and complex, impossible to achieve any other way. 3 hours of simmering. In 1955, Household Management Guide specifically recommended it for older women living alone, noting that one bird produced 4 to 5 meals. An old fowl cost little, leeks cost nothing from the garden. The prunes had been in the pantry for months. Number 1. Lentil soup with a smoked haddock tail. A smoked haddock tail, the end piece fishmongers sold cheapest, went into the pot with cold water. It was gently simmered for 20 minutes, never boiled. The fish was lifted out, bones and skin discarded, and the flaked flesh was returned to the liquid. Then a cupful of red lentils, an onion, and a potato were added. Lid on, lowest heat, 45 minutes. What came out was a dense, golden, lightly smoky soup of extraordinary character for something that cost 8 pence and dirtied 1 pot. It reheated perfectly the next morning. It wasted nothing, and it tasted every single time like being properly fed. These 21-pot suppers were built for people who cooked alone, on little, without fuss, and without complaint. The common thread is not poverty, but competence. It was the knowledge that a single pot, the right ingredients, and enough time could produce something genuinely good. Share the one you remember in the comments.